The battlefield was a cacophony of chaos, the air thick with smoke and the metallic tang of energy weapons clashing. The human soldier crouched behind a shattered alien barricade, his breath ragged but steady as he scanned the horizon for movement. His name wasn't important. Just another face in the endless war between humanity and the enigmatic alien race known only as the Valathans. What mattered was that he had been chosen for this mission, to retrieve something, or someone, the Valathans had lost. Hours earlier, intelligence reports had come through about a high-value target stranded on the outskirts of their territory. A young female, believed to be of royal lineage, had gone missing during one of their skirmishes. Her disappearance had sparked whispers among both factions, not just because she was royalty, but because her capture could tip the scales of power. But what no one anticipated was how deeply personal this rescue would become. As the soldier crept forward, dodging plasma bursts and collapsing debris, he spotted her, a figure huddled against the ruins of an ancient structure. She was unlike any Valathan he'd ever seen before. While most of them were imposing beings with shimmering skin and sharp features, she exuded grace even in distress. Her long silver hair cascaded over her shoulders like liquid moonlight, framing a delicate face etched with fear and defiance. Her eyes, large and luminous, glowed faintly green, reflecting the eerie light of the dying sun above. He approached cautiously, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "I'm not here to hurt you," he called out, his voice calm despite the adrenaline coursing through him. She flinched at first, recoiling further into the shadows, but when she finally met his gaze, there was something in her expression, a flicker of hope mingled with suspicion, that made him pause. "I won't leave without you," he said firmly, taking another step closer. "Your people are looking for you." Her lips parted as if she wanted to speak, but no words came out. Instead, she extended a trembling hand toward him, hesitating only briefly before allowing him to help her up. As they began their perilous journey back across the battlefield, the weight of her presence settled heavily on him. He didn't know who she truly was or why she seemed so different from the others of her kind, but one thing became clear. Bringing her home wasn't just a mission, it was a promise he couldn't afford to break. The trek back was grueling, every step fraught with danger. Explosions lit up the sky like fireworks, casting harsh shadows that danced across the barren landscape. The soldier kept a firm grip on the princess's arm, guiding her through the wreckage while shielding her from stray blasts. They moved in silence, save for the occasional gasp or stumble from the princess, whose slender frame betrayed her lack of combat training. At one point, they found themselves cornered by a squadron of hostile Valathan warriors. Their jagged armor gleamed menacingly under the dim light, and their weapons hummed with lethal intent. The soldier tightened his hold on his rifle, knowing full well that engaging them head-on would mean certain death. Yet, when he glanced down at the princess beside him, he saw something unexpected: resolve. Her glowing eyes narrowed slightly, and she stood taller, radiating an aura of quiet authority. "Wait," she whispered urgently, placing a hand on his arm. Before he could protest, she stepped forward, raising her chin defiantly. With a voice that carried both strength and sorrow, she addressed the warriors in their guttural tongue. The soldier couldn't understand the words, but the tone was unmistakable, a plea laced with command. For a tense moment, the two groups stared each other down, the air crackling with tension. Then, slowly, the leader of the squad lowered his weapon. He exchanged a few curt phrases with the princess before gesturing for his team to stand down. Without another word, they melted back into the chaos, leaving the soldier and the princess alone once more. "What did you say to them?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the distant rumble of artillery. She turned to him, her expression unreadable. "That I am not their enemy, and neither are you." Though her answer offered little clarity, it was enough to propel them forward. As they pressed on, the soldier couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her than met the eye. There was a regality in the way she carried herself, a quiet dignity that seemed almost otherworldly, even for an alien. And yet, beneath that exterior, he sensed vulnerability, as though she bore burdens far greater than anyone could imagine. It wasn't until they reached the edge of the battlefield that she spoke again. "Why are you doing this?" she asked softly, her gaze fixed on the horizon ahead. "You don't owe me anything." He hesitated, unsure how to respond. The truth was, he didn't fully understand it himself. Perhaps it was duty. Perhaps it was instinct. Or maybe it was simply the look in her eyes, the same flicker of hope he'd seen earlier, that compelled him to keep going. "Because it's the right thing to do," he replied finally, meeting her gaze. "And because I think your family deserves to have you back." For the first time since they'd met, a small smile tugged at the corners of her lips. It was fleeting, but it lingered in his mind long after they resumed their journey. When they finally reached the rendezvous point, the sight that greeted them was nothing short of breathtaking. Nestled within a valley surrounded by towering crystalline spires stood the Valethan stronghold, a sprawling cityscape of shimmering architecture that seemed to pulse with life. Its translucent walls refracted the sunlight into dazzling hues, creating an ethereal glow that bathed the entire area in soft radiance. The soldier felt a pang of awe mixed with unease as they approached. This was uncharted territory for humans, a place where few dared to venture. Yet, as they drew nearer, the atmosphere shifted. The once bustling streets grew eerily silent, and the towering gates creaked open ominously, revealing a procession of figures emerging from within. At the forefront stood a being who commanded attention simply by existing. She was tall and statuesque, her elongated limbs draped in flowing robes that shimmered like starlight. Her silvery hair cascaded down her back in intricate braids adorned with jewels that sparkled like miniature galaxies. But it was her eyes, those piercing emerald-green orbs, that held the soldier captive. They burned with a fierce intensity, scanning him with a mixture of curiosity and barely restrained emotion. Behind her stood rows of guards, their postures rigid and unwavering, yet their expressions softened slightly as they caught sight of the princess. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, growing louder as realization dawned. The soldier watched as the young woman beside him stiffened, her breathing quickening. She took a hesitant step forward, then another, until she was standing mere feet away from the regal figure. "Mother!" she whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of relief and apprehension. The queen's reaction was instantaneous. Her composure faltered, her lips parting in disbelief as tears welled up in her eyes. For a moment, time seemed to freeze, the world narrowing to the space between mother and daughter. Then, with a cry that echoed across the valley, the queen surged forward, enveloping her child in a desperate embrace. The soldier stood rooted to the spot, overwhelmed by the raw emotion unfolding before him. He had expected gratitude, perhaps even admiration, but this was something else entirely. It was love, pure and unyielding, transcending species and language and everything else that separated them. As the reunion unfolded, the soldier felt a strange sense of detachment, as though he were witnessing a scene meant solely for these two souls. Yet, amidst the joy and relief, he couldn't ignore the weight of uncertainty pressing down on him. What role did he play now? Was he merely an outsider intruding upon a sacred moment, or was there more to his presence here? Before he could dwell too deeply on these thoughts, the queen pulled back slightly, holding her daughter at arm's length as though ensuring she was real. Her gaze then shifted to the soldier, and for the first time, he saw something akin to recognition flicker in her eyes. "You brought her back," she said, her voice resonant and filled with gratitude. Though the words were simple, they carried the weight of countless unspoken emotions. The soldier nodded, unsure how to respond. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could utter a word, the princess interjected. "Mom, I am back," she declared, her voice stronger now, filled with determination. "He saved me." The statement hung in the air, reverberating through the gathered crowd. The queen's expression softened further, her eyes glistening with unshed tears as she turned her full attention to the human man who had risked everything to return her daughter. In that moment, the soldier realized that his journey was far from over. Whatever bond had formed between them on the battlefield was only the beginning, a prelude to something far greater and more profound than he could have ever imagined. The celebration that followed was unlike anything the soldier had ever witnessed. The Valethan stronghold transformed into a kaleidoscope of light and sound, as if the very fabric of the universe had been woven into the festivities. Crystalline structures pulsed with vibrant colors, casting an iridescent glow over the gathering. Music filled the air, a haunting melody played on instruments that seemed to resonate directly within the soul. The queen, still clad in her radiant robes, presided over the event with an air of regal grace, her every gesture imbued with quiet authority. Yet, beneath the surface, there was a warmth, a humanity, that transcended their differences. The soldier found himself at the center of it all, an unexpected guest thrust into the heart of an alien culture. He was ushered to a place of honor near the queen, seated beside the princess whose life he had saved. She sat quietly, her demeanor softer now, her glowing eyes occasionally darting toward him with a mix of gratitude and curiosity. Around them, Valathans of all ages gathered, their voices rising in harmonious chants that seemed to echo the stars themselves. Despite the overwhelming hospitality, the soldier couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider. The customs were unfamiliar, the language mostly incomprehensible, and the sheer scale of the celebration left him dizzy. Yet, as he observed the interactions around him, he began to notice subtle shifts in the atmosphere. The initial wariness many Valathans had displayed toward him gave way to cautious curiosity. Some approached him tentatively, their elongated fingers brushing against his armor or offering small tokens of appreciation, delicate trinkets that shimmered like captured starlight. The queen, meanwhile, watched him closely, her piercing gaze never straying for long. There was an unspoken question in her eyes, one that lingered even as she engaged in animated conversation with her advisors. At one point, she leaned closer, her voice low but commanding. "You have done more than save my daughter," she said, her words translated through a device worn around her neck. "You have bridged a gap we thought unbridgeable." The soldier blinked, taken aback by the weight of her statement. I only did what I thought was right," he stammered, unsure how to respond. The queen's lips curved into a faint smile, one that seemed to hold centuries of wisdom. "And that is precisely why you are extraordinary," she replied. "In a world defined by division, you chose unity." The praise unsettled him, stirring emotions he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. He glanced at the princess, who was now laughing softly at something a young Valathan child had said. Her laughter was melodic, a sound that seemed to resonate with the music surrounding them. For the first time, he noticed the subtle way her fingers toyed with the hem of her gown, betraying a nervousness that mirrored his own. As the night wore on, the soldier found himself drawn into conversations with various members of the royal court. Each encounter revealed new facets of Valathan society, its history, its values, its struggles. They spoke of wars fought not just against humans but within their own ranks, of ancient prophecies foretelling a union between their species, and of the queen's tireless efforts to protect her people. Through it all, the soldier listened intently, piecing together fragments of understanding that painted a picture far more complex than the battlefield could ever convey. Yet, amidst the revelry, he couldn't ignore the undercurrents of tension. Whispers traveled through the crowd, hinting at dissent among the Valathans. Not everyone welcomed his presence, nor the implications of his actions. Some viewed him as a threat, a symbol of the very conflict that had torn their worlds apart. Others saw opportunity, a chance to forge alliances that might bring lasting peace. The soldier felt the weight of these opposing forces pressing down on him, a reminder that his role here was far from simple. When the celebrations began to wind down, the queen motioned for him to follow her to a secluded balcony overlooking the valley. The cool night air was a welcome reprieve from the heat of the festivities, and the view was nothing short of breathtaking. Stars stretched endlessly across the sky, their light reflected in the crystalline spires below. For a moment, they stood in silence, the enormity of the moment settling over them. "There is much you do not yet understand," the queen said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "But know this, you have set into motion events that cannot be undone." The soldier swallowed hard, the gravity of her words sinking in. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. The queen turned to him, her eyes glowing with an intensity that seemed to pierce straight through him. "Now," she said, "we begin anew." Back on Earth, news of the soldier's mission spread like wildfire, igniting debates that tore through military ranks and civilian circles alike. Some hailed him as a hero, a beacon of hope in an era defined by bloodshed. Others dismissed his actions as reckless, accusing him of jeopardizing humanity's fragile position in the ongoing conflict. The media seized upon every detail, spinning narratives that ranged from triumphant to conspiratorial. Headlines screamed of "the human who brought peace" and "traitor to our cause," painting conflicting portraits of a man caught between worlds. Within the military, opinions were equally divided. High-ranking officials convened emergency meetings, poring over intelligence reports and strategizing how best to leverage or mitigate, the fallout of his actions. Some argued that the return of the Valathan princess could serve as a diplomatic breakthrough, a chance to negotiate terms that might end the war. Others feared it would embolden the enemy, giving them leverage to demand concessions humanity couldn't afford to make. Amidst the chaos, the soldier's superiors struggled to decide whether to commend or reprimand him. For the soldier himself, the scrutiny was suffocating. Every step he took was shadowed by whispers, every decision dissected under a microscope. Friends who had once shared camaraderie with him now regarded him with wary eyes, unsure whether to trust the man who had crossed lines no one dared to tread. Strangers approached him with either reverence or disdain, their reactions unpredictable and often jarring. The weight of expectation pressed down on him, heavier than any armor he had worn on the battlefield. Yet, it was the internal conflict that gnawed at him most. Doubts gnashed at the edges of his mind, questions that refused to be silenced. Had he acted out of duty or desperation? Was he truly a harbinger of peace, or merely a pawn in a game far larger than himself? The memory of the Queen's words haunted him, events set into motion, paths altered forever. He replayed moments from his journey, searching for clarity in the chaos. The princess's quiet strength, the Queen's piercing gaze, the murmurs of dissent among the Valathans, they all swirled together in a maelstrom of uncertainty. One evening, as he sat alone in his quarters, staring at the cold metal walls that seemed to close in around him, a message arrived. It was brief, cryptic, and unsigned, delivered through channels unknown. "The bridge has been built. Will you cross it?" It read. The words sent a chill down his spine, their meaning elusive yet undeniable. Crossing the bridge implied commitment, a leap into uncharted territory where allies and enemies blurred together. It meant embracing the unknown, stepping beyond the boundaries of loyalty and identity. As he pondered the message, flashes of the battlefield returned to him, the smoke, the screams, the moment he first locked eyes with the princess. He remembered the weight of her hand in his, the trust she placed in him despite their differences. And he recalled the Queen's parting words, spoken with a conviction that transcended language, "We begin anew." The soldier clenched his fists, his resolve hardening. Whatever lay ahead, whatever challenges awaited, he knew one thing for certain: he couldn't turn back now. The soldier's resolve was tested sooner than he anticipated. Days after receiving the cryptic message, an unexpected visitor arrived at his quarters, a human diplomat named Evelyn Cress, known for her sharp intellect and unyielding pragmatism. She entered without ceremony, her tailored suit contrasting sharply with the utilitarian surroundings of his room. Her piercing blue eyes scanned him briefly before she spoke. "You've created quite the mess," she said bluntly, taking a seat across from him. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" He bristled at her tone but kept his voice steady. "I saved someone's life. Isn't that what we're supposed to do?" Evelyn leaned forward, her expression hardening. "You didn't just save a life. You returned the lost heir of the Valathan throne during one of the most volatile periods in their history. Their factions are already using this as leverage. Some want peace, others see it as an opportunity to demand reparations or even territory. And now, thanks to you, humanity is caught in the middle." Her words hit like a hammer, forcing him to confront the broader implications of his actions. He had been so focused on the immediate, the rescue, the reunion, that he hadn't considered the political ripple effects. But Evelyn wasn't finished. "There's more," she continued, lowering her voice. "We intercepted communications suggesting that not all Valathans believe your intentions were pure. Some think you orchestrated her capture to begin with, using her as bait to negotiate terms favorable to us." The accusation struck him like a physical blow. "That's insane. I risked my life to bring her back." "I know," Evelyn replied, her tone softening slightly. "But perception matters more than truth in times like these. If they turn against you, and by extension, us, it could undo everything you've worked for." Before he could respond, she slid a datapad across the table. On its screen was a series of encrypted messages between high-ranking Valathan officials. One phrase stood out: "The bridge must burn." "What does that mean?" he asked, his stomach tightening. "It means there are those who don't want peace," Evelyn said grimly. "They see your actions as a threat to their power. To them, destroying the bridge, the fragile connection you've built, is the only way to maintain control. As if on cue, alarms blared outside, shattering the tense silence. Evelyn shot to her feet, her face pale. "They're here." Chaos erupted within moments. Armed Valethan soldiers stormed the base, their sleek armor gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. They moved with precision, targeting key personnel and cutting off communication lines. The soldier grabbed his weapon instinctively, adrenaline surging through him as memories of the battlefield flooded back. This time, however, he wasn't fighting alone. Evelyn proved herself resourceful, guiding him through hidden corridors and secret exits designed for emergencies. "We need to get to the command center," she urged, her voice tight with urgency. "If they take over, they'll erase every shred of evidence proving your innocence." Dodging patrols and narrowly avoiding detection, they reached the command center only to find it abandoned. The screens displayed live footage of the invasion, along with incoming reports confirming Evelyn's worst fears. The attack was being led by a faction within the Valethan military opposed to reconciliation with humanity. Their leader, a general named Zitherus, had long advocated for dominance over diplomacy. "We can't let them win," the soldier muttered, his jaw clenched. "Not after everything." Evelyn nodded, her gaze flickering to the surveillance feed showing Zitherus addressing his troops. "Then we'll need help, from both sides." Their first call went unanswered. The second connected to a familiar voice laced with static. "Soldier," came the Queen's resonant tone. "What has happened?" He explained the situation quickly, leaving no room for embellishment. When he finished, there was a long pause before she responded. "Zitherus has always sought to undermine my rule. His hatred for your kind blinds him to reason." "Your Majesty," Evelyn interjected, stepping closer to the comms device. "If he succeeds, it won't just be humanity that suffers. Your daughter will become a pawn in his schemes." Another silence followed, heavier this time. Finally, the Queen spoke again. "I will send reinforcements. But you must hold the line until they arrive." Reinforcements came in the form of an unlikely ally, the princess herself. Disguised in plain robes, she appeared alongside a small contingent of loyal Valethan warriors who had defied Zitherus's orders. Her presence shocked the soldier, not because of her bravery, but because of the fire in her eyes. Gone was the timid girl he'd rescued. In her place stood a determined young woman ready to fight for her people, and perhaps for something more. Together, they devised a plan. While the Loyalists engaged Zitherus's forces head-on, the soldier, Evelyn, and the princess would infiltrate the enemy stronghold to disable their jamming systems, allowing the Queen's fleet to intervene. It was a suicide mission, but none of them hesitated. The infiltration was harrowing. Every step brought new dangers, booby traps, ambushes, and close calls that left them battered but resolute. Along the way, the princess revealed fragments of her past, speaking of the isolation she'd endured as a child due to her mixed heritage. Her mother had shielded her from public scrutiny, fearing backlash from xenophobic factions. Yet, despite her sheltered upbringing, she carried a quiet strength that inspired those around her. "You're risking everything for us," the soldier said quietly as they paused in a shadowy corridor. "Why?" She looked at him, her luminous eyes reflecting the faint glow of emergency lights. "Because you did the same for me. Because sometimes, bridges aren't meant to burn, they're meant to grow stronger." Their moment was interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. As they prepared to move, Evelyn whispered urgently, "Remember, trust no one. Not even allies." When they finally reached the central chamber housing the jamming equipment, they found themselves face to face with Zitherus. Towering and menacing, he sneered at the sight of them. "You thought you could stop me? Foolish humans and traitorous cowards." The ensuing confrontation was brutal. Outnumbered and outgunned, they fought with desperation, relying on teamwork and quick thinking to survive. The princess used her knowledge of Valethan technology to disable parts of the system while the soldier and Evelyn provided cover fire. Just as hope seemed lost, reinforcements arrived, not just the Queen's forces, but also rogue elements of the Valethan military disillusioned with Zitherus's extremism. In the end, it was the princess who delivered the final blow, confronting Zitherus with a courage that silenced the room. "This ends now," she declared, her voice unwavering. With a single decisive action, She neutralized the threat, though the cost weighed heavily on all of them. As the dust settled, the soldier stood amidst the wreckage, staring at the horizon where the Queen's ships descended like angels of salvation. Beside him, the princess placed a hand on his shoulder. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything." Yet, as relief washed over them, a new transmission crackled through the air, a warning from an unknown source. "The bridge may still stand, but the war is far from over." And with that, the story took another turn into the unknown. The transmission's ominous words hung in the air, casting a shadow over the fragile victory they had just achieved. The soldier exchanged uneasy glances with Evelyn and the princess, their shared exhaustion momentarily forgotten as tension gripped them once more. "What does it mean?" the princess asked, her voice tinged with worry but steadied by resolve. Evelyn frowned, tapping furiously at her datapad to trace the source of the message. "It's encrypted and fragmented. Whoever sent this doesn't want us to know who, or what, they are." Before anyone could respond, the Queen herself entered the chamber, flanked by her most trusted advisors. Her presence commanded instant calm, though her eyes betrayed deep concern. She approached the group, placing a gentle hand on her daughter's shoulder before addressing them all. "We have won today," she said firmly, her voice resonating with authority. "But peace is never guaranteed when fear and hatred linger. Let this be a reminder that our work is far from done." Her gaze lingered on the soldier, gratitude mingling with something else, hope. "You've shown us what can happen when two worlds choose understanding over enmity. But bridges must be fortified, not merely built." The soldier nodded, feeling both humbled and emboldened by her words. He looked around at the faces of those gathered, the Queen's unwavering strength, the princess's quiet determination, Evelyn's pragmatic resilience, and realized he wasn't alone in carrying the weight of the future. Together, they represented a coalition stronger than any single faction or ideology. Over the following weeks, efforts were made to solidify the fragile truce brokered through blood and sacrifice. Diplomatic negotiations began under the watchful eyes of both human and Velethan leaders, with the princess serving as an ambassador of goodwill. Her unique perspective, as someone who had experienced isolation yet chose unity, made her an invaluable voice in bridging divides. She worked tirelessly alongside the soldier, whose actions had become symbolic of hope for many on both sides. Meanwhile, Zithrus's defeat served as a turning point within Velethan society. Factions previously aligned with him splintered, some joining the cause for peace while others retreated into obscurity. The Queen seized the opportunity to implement reforms aimed at fostering inclusivity and dismantling xenophobic ideologies that had long plagued her people. It was slow progress, fraught with challenges, but the momentum was undeniable. For the soldier, life changed irrevocably. Once vilified by some and celebrated by others, he found himself embraced by both humans and Velethans alike as a symbol of courage and compassion. Though he still grappled with doubts about his role in such monumental events, he drew strength from the bonds he'd formed. Evelyn became a steadfast ally, guiding diplomatic efforts with sharp wit and unyielding dedication. And the princess, she became something more. Their relationship evolved organically, rooted in mutual respect and shared experiences. Late-night conversations turned into moments of laughter, debates sparked intellectual growth, and silences grew comfortable rather than awkward. One evening, as they stood together overlooking Earth's moonlit surface during a rare visit home, the princess broke the quiet. "I used to think I didn't belong anywhere," she admitted softly. "Too human for my kind, too alien for yours. But now, I feel like maybe belonging isn't about fitting into one world or another. Maybe it's about finding where you're needed most." The soldier smiled, taking her hand in his. "You belong here, with me. No matter how complicated things get, we'll figure it out together." Months later, the alliance between humanity and the Velethans reached a historic milestone, the signing of the Concord Accord. Held aboard a massive orbital station designed collaboratively by engineers from both species, the ceremony brought tears to the eyes of even the staunchest skeptics. As representatives affixed their signatures to the document, cheers erupted from crowds watching across galaxies, united in celebration. At the heart of it all stood the soldier and the princess, side by side. Their bond had transcended boundaries, proving that love and trust could flourish even in the starkest of contrasts. When the Queen approached them afterward, Her expression softened into one of pure joy. "You've given us more than peace," she told them. "You've given us hope, for ourselves, and for generations to come." As fireworks illuminated the night sky, blending human pyrotechnics with Valethan light-dancing technology, the soldier felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The battles they had fought, the sacrifices they had endured, it had all led to this moment. A future where bridges no longer burned, but thrived.